Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Sofronas, and today I'm on with Jake Baadsgaard. Jake, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here with you, Alex. I'm the founder and CEO of Disruptive Advertising, which is a performance marketing agency, and just very passionate about seeing and activating the greatness in others. So that's what I'm all about.
Wow. What was that again?
I see the greatness in others sometimes before they want to see it in themselves, and I am great at activating that.
Okay, well, how do you do that? How do you activate the greatness in others? I think that's the million-dollar question.
Let's just jump right into it. Like it's like we're on a date and I picked you up for the first time and we're just going straight for the kiss. But everyone brings something unique to the world. And here's what's going on with most of us. We think to be a gift to the world and to live our purpose, we need to be good at everything. But Alex, half of what makes you and I both great are the weaknesses that we bring to the world. And life is hard when we carry the burden of feeling like we always need to be the ones that have it figured out and that everyone needs our strengths. Because the reality is, if no one had weaknesses, we'd have no reason. What's the point of life? When I show up in my strengths and serve you the best way that I know how, and then allow you to serve me in the areas that I'm not strong, that's the foundations of a great society and relationships in general. And so, one of the things that I see that has held me back tremendously and that I see in others as well is that they put on these masks and think that we have to show up as the strong person all the time, when in fact, one of the biggest impacts we make in the world is allowing other people to serve us. And so it's fun. I love helping people see their strengths and really lean into those because when they do, man, they can do almost impossible and very challenging things in a way that gives them energy. And when they let go of the burden of trying to be all things to all people, it's like, man, just watch out. It's special. And I love witnessing that in myself and in others as well.
Mm-hmm. I found even in my own life that the more confident I have become, the more comfortable I am with my weaknesses. And I think it ultimately comes out of insecurity to put on a face of like, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
have it all figured out. And that really doesn't help people, I've found, because if you're doing that, it almost has a contagious effect where now nobody else wants to show their weaknesses because you're not showing your weaknesses. And so they don't want to look bad by comparison when in fact you're both just hiding your weaknesses. And that doesn't help anybody. And also that people want to help you. I found that, contrary to what I previously thought and what a lot of people probably think is that, it's a burden for people to help you. But I certainly want to help people. I go out of my way if people ask for my help to to help them. And it makes me feel useful. I at the end of the day,
Gives you
like I want
purpose.
to do that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's funny, we want to rob other people of the opportunity to do that for us.
Right.
I was sharing an experience recently. It was my senior year in college. I was taking 18 credit hours to try and wrap things up. I was working full time, and I was the local scoutmaster for the youth scouting program. So, needless to say, I was very busy, and I was also married with our first child that was a baby. And there was this impromptu activity that we were doing where I had a fluke injury and landed on someone's foot awkwardly, and it broke my leg into like 10 pieces the week before finals. And it and then while they were operating to like put it all back together, I aspirated something, so I got pretty bad pneumonia as well. And Alex, and I'm a big strong guy, I'm entrepreneurial, I serve other people, I make things happen, whatever. And I found myself in this, holy shit, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do right now. And I went from being the guy that's always serving everybody else to my landlord saying, "Hey, don't worry about rent for the next couple of months. I heard about what happened. Like, I just care about you and making sure that you're good. I know you just had a baby, you're in college, you're trying to do all these things." I have this classmate show up that I didn't even know his last name. I didn't know him well enough. And he brought me notes for all my finals to help me be prepared with some treats that he thought I would like. My best friend from high school would just come hang out with me and play chess while my face coloring was off because I couldn't get enough oxygen. The job where I was working said, "Hey, we'll keep paying you, don't worry, and like we'll even find a way for you to work remote when you're feeling ready." And I could give you a list of like 100 things.
Wow.
And that was an experience in my life where I'm like, whoa, I might be giving more to them than I ever could by needing their help right now, you know? And so when I see a world where no one wants to act like they need help, and then they're just dying on the inside, rather than how can I show up and serve with where I'm strong and be open and vulnerable enough to allow others to do the same for me, I'll never forget that experience. And the depth of relationships that created was powerful.
Wow. Yeah, and it reminds me of one of the things that I try to bring to my work when I'm thinking about decisions related to my career. And it's that I trust the people that I work with, the managers, the mentors, to see within me what I don't see, because I think we all see ourselves as infinitely complex in a sense. You know, you can't figure out yourself. And it's like you're so simple to the other person that's looking at you. Like it's like you see people in such clarity compared to how they see themselves. And that's why it's so important to lean on the people around you who care about you to help you know what to do next. I mean, and sometimes you have to follow your heart, but also when it comes to like a career decision, what are your actual strengths? Not what you might want to do or what you are allured by, but what are you actually strong at? Do you find that as a leader, that's one of the skills that you have to build, is finding the strengths in people and guiding them towards their maximum value?
Absolutely. What comes up for me when you ask that question is I built my business from freelance to 10 million in annual revenue the first few years of the business. And it was me putting on the mantle of, I will figure this all out. I will tell everyone what they're supposed to do, and I will create and make this happen. And all of a sudden, I ended up with a business that I didn't love anymore because I was burned out. Everyone was kind of waiting for me to tell them what to do because that's how I'd run the business. And I won't go into all the details, but in all of my life, I was struggling because I was trying to force and be that person all the time. And then as we went through the next stage of the business, I had some really big epiphany moments in my personal and professional life that something needed to change. And as we then grew the business from 10 to 25 million, what I realized was, whoa, I've got to openly acknowledge, here's the areas that I see with clarity and that I need to move forward with the business. And here's the areas that I see challenges with, and I'm not the right person to solve this. This is a different skill set. This is a different energy, a different expertise that we need here. And I don't know how to fix this one. And all of a sudden, when I started looking around and saying, who's here? And if it's the right person, they'll know how to fix the things that I don't know how. And when I would show up with that mentality of, here's what I see, and I don't know how to solve that, how would you do it? And then all of a sudden, people are like, whoa, you want me to step in and actually help? You don't have it all figured out. And it feels like that actually kind of took leadership to a new level when I started showing up and saying, I'm really great at connecting people to a vision. I'm really good at bringing the energy to get projects started, but I'm not good at prioritizing. I'm not good at project planning. I'm not good at the details and the fit and finish that get things to the end. So who's interested and wants to help me with those types of things? And when you said, how do you see and activate the greatness in others? You just present the opportunity and you see it in their eyes when they're like, whoa, that's the thing I want to help you figure out. And it just like a magnet, they step into their strengths. And now what it's done is it's created a business that I love being a part of because I get to do the parts I'm great at and allow other people to do the parts that I'm not good at. Thank goodness that we can both serve each other in that way.
Mm-hmm. And if you were to accelerate that process of understanding what you're great at and what you need help with, what would you have done differently?
You know, it's funny. It's in alpha right now and launching beta later this year, but I've actually created the whole thing for it called Disruptive University. And the outcomes and things that I focus on that do accelerate that is number one, authenticity. They're one of the outcomes that I see that I created for myself over time that I think can be significantly accelerated is to understand four things about yourself. And that is clarity on what your strengths are, clarity on what your values are, because those are different. Those are different. How you serve the world, like what the world needs. What's your mission statement? How do you serve a need that exists in the world? And then how do you make money in a way that's in balance and in alignment with those things? And the intersection of all of those areas is more of your identity, your reason for being, your purpose. And there are very simple exercises that exist and that I've adapted and kind of found what works for me and those that I've worked with. But that's the first thing that we do is like, who are you? What are you good at? What are your values? How do you serve the world? And what can you make money doing? And getting clear on those things, man, it accelerates. You go from living a reactive life to an intentional life very quickly. And then the other three things that I focus on is clarity of creating vision, that frontal part of your brain that makes you uniquely human, that allows you to think abstractly, to dream, versus your brainstem, which is the very animalistic part and survival part of your brain. When you start getting people to think out, what does great look like in relationships 3 years from now? What does great look like professionally? What does great look, not good, what does great look like 3 years from now? And you start exercising that muscle of your brain, all of a sudden, now you know who you are. You have vision for where you're going. We then get clarity on how to be that person now and how to take clear and specific and focused action. And then I actually love documenting growth stories for the people that I work with as well, so that we can say, look at that cool adventure you went on and how much you grew throughout the process. And so that's the framework and the system that I've actually been building out and been hard at work at for the last few months.
Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, I'm a huge proponent for education, and I think we desperately need to rethink how people are educated. Do you see your education system replacing any piece of the current education system, or is it an add-on, something that can help refine somebody as they get into the professional world or even in their personal lives to move forward?
I think everything has a purpose. And so I don't know that I'm approaching anything with the intent to replace anything. All I know is that you asked the question of, if you could go talk to yourself 10 years ago and what would have accelerated this, this is exactly the things that took me a lot of pain, suffering, and dollars to figure out in over a 10-year period that I have consolidated, and just because everyone's on their own path. So I don't even try to pretend like it's what's best for everybody. But hey, here's what worked for me. You might find yourself and your own path in that, because there is no one way for everybody. And the second we try to give that to someone else, you tell me what my path is, it doesn't work. You have to take personal responsibility for that. But there are frameworks, there are principles that exposing yourself to and learning can help you find that path as well, just a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
a lot faster.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, the world is changing a lot, and I think that now more than ever, all of the opportunity is right in front of us, but the strategy of how to make best use of it and the constant distractions makes it really difficult to succeed, but not for a lack of resources, not for a lack of opportunity, but rather a lack of focus and a lack of strategy. So it's great that you're bringing that, bringing that ability to people. I think that currently we're not being educated about the world that we're living in because it's changing so much. And so you get into the real world, the professional world, and there's a gap between what you've learned and how to succeed. And that gap didn't maybe exist 20, 30 years ago or 50 years ago when you could just get out of college, get a job, get a house. It was a lot more straightforward. You had to work hard, of course, but it was completely different than the world we're walking into today, where you could build an AI app in a day. The point is that there's a lot of opportunity out there with the current technology that's just not being taught in schools.
The best thing anyone can learn is you, Alex, we all bring something very unique to the world. There is a unique combination that makes us who we are. and having the courage to experiment and try and trust our inner knowing to figure out what that is and to express that part of ourselves, that's what makes life awesome. It makes it rich, it makes it beautiful. What makes life hellish, and I speak from personal experience and decades of it, is trying to be something that we're not, that keeps everybody else happy. And that's a hard way to live. And we all get caught into that from time to time. And when I remember, it doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve the people I'm trying to keep happy, and it doesn't serve me. It feels like it kind of takes off the chains. So I would say of anything that's disruptive that I'm ultimately trying to bring to the world is that. Remember and live in alignment with who you are. And if you're not quite sure who that is, how fun that you get to explore and experiment with what that is. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, and what you're describing, which is, I was talking to my friend about this yesterday, was that happiness is hard work. It's not just something that you get for free, just waking up. You have to, first of all, put everything in your life in order. You can't have a lot of disorder, a lot of things wrong. And then you have the whole issue of intrusive thoughts. You have negativity that might, rush over you that you have to resolve. And it's a constant battle for everybody. There's nobody that if they take their eye off the ball and stop trying to, be an intentionally optimistic and happy person, that they'll just get it anyway. Everybody can be brought down or dragged down. So and I'm curious if you'll agree. I think you probably will, that it's an intention and it's a constant practice to be happy. And it's not easy. Like, being negative is way easier. It's more painful, but it certainly takes less effort.
Yeah. I think I agree with the heart of what you're saying. I actually think our default mode is love and happiness. And I think a lot of the intentional practices are actually letting go of all of the things that we're not, that are preventing us from just being ourselves. Because I think when we are just being who we are, our natural state is actually a beautiful state to be in. And a lot of the things that we feel like we've got to battle and work through are kind of more mind-made constructs. It's more about letting go than trying to solve them, from my perspective. Mm-hmm. And from a business context and from a marketing standpoint, here are like a couple of ways that I like to approach that with businesses. And because a lot of them say, we've got to work hard, we've got to keep ourselves in order, we've got to hit these growth targets, we've got to move everything forward. And I just love 3 questions, maybe 4, we'll see. First off, why did you start the business in the first place? Or why does this business exist in the first place if it's a marketer that serves that business? When you get to the genesis of that story, it is almost inevitably there was some amount of pain and suffering that existed in the marketplace that someone wanted to solve. And they did it with a product or a service. And understanding that genesis, like that inspiration that started the business, always inspires me. And then when a business or a marketer says, and we got to grow by 20% this year. And I said, well, if you grew 20%, but your customers got less value this year, would you be happy? Well, no. If you grew 20%, but your employees hated working there and their lives were worse as a result of that, would you be happy? Well, no. Well, if your customers were happy and your employees were growing, but you weren't making any money and the business was suffering, no. And so those are always the 3 questions I ask them, is to say, like, you've got to balance those 3 things together. And all of these principles that you and I are talking about, sometimes they can start to flutter away and feel very theoretical and hard to grasp. But that's when I just say, tell me a customer success story that inspires you. And they'll always have one. You'd give me plenty of those. And then I say, tell me about a colleague or an employee success story that inspires you, right? And between the genesis story, a customer, and an employee success story, that's where you kind of find the heartbeat of that business. And then you say, okay, can we stay aligned with creating these outcomes and grow by 20%? That's the question that we're really asking here. And we say, okay, let's step back and let's use the data to inform that. Let's understand our audience to inform that as well. And okay, if we want to grow by 20%, here's what it's going to take to pull that off. Does that maintain or increase customer value? Does that maintain or increase employee value? Can keep the business healthy and moving in the right direction. And then all of a sudden we start asking questions that say, now we have a goal that is tied back to the reason why this business exists, that drives better customer value, better employee value. And now we're all bought in to achieving that goal for reasons that money cannot buy. Right? And it tends to produce more money when we show up that way as well. Because now everyone's got a goal. They're like, oh my gosh, I see how this goal contributes to customer value, employee growth, and how it's going to create sustainable growth opportunities for the business that's good for all of us. Whoa, now growing by 20% that we know that we can do, that's exciting to me. And I feel like I can show up authentically in my strengths to support that. That's when these principles kind of become a little bit more practical in business dealings, where it's like, sweet, now we know how to move this forward collectively and lean into those principles of authenticity for the business and for ourselves personally as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting information. And like you said, it is very high level. And I think that, you've clearly built on lessons throughout your life to get to this point where, the only way to keep moving up is to understand these higher level concepts. And I'm curious, when you thinking back to when you were building your business, how have these skills you needed to get from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, how have those changed between then and now to build your business now that it is much more successful? Clearly now you have to think about a lot of more motivational things about how to, keep everybody in, aligned with, like you said, the heartbeat of the business. But how does that differ from when you were just starting out? Is there any, are you applying the same concepts, or would you recommend thinking in a different way? Both like what you experienced, but also what you'd recommend.
Yeah. I think that there are ways to accelerate things, but I don't know that there's necessarily shortcuts, so to speak. And when I first started the business, it goes way back to when I was 13 years old. I grew up in a family of 10. All of my needs were well met, but my wants, if I wanted them, I had to figure out a way to create that for myself at a very early age. So I've had a job since I was like 8 years old. And one time I had an aunt that had recently been divorced that picked me and some of my siblings up, took her to her fancy house in a big city, took us to the mall and handed us all an envelope with $2,000 in it and said, it was summer. She's like, hey, go get your school clothes for the year. Let me know if you need any more money. And as a kid that hadn't grown up with much, even in today's dollars, that would be pretty cool. But I mean, that's 26 years ago. It like blew my mind, Alex. And I thought, man, if this is what being rich is like, where you just get to like go pick people up and give them money and do cool things, like I'm all in. I want to be rich. And it was a very impressionable experience for me at that age. And I think a lot of people in their 20s, especially, they do want to make money. They want to show something to themselves and they want to show something to the world of like, look, I can slay a dragon. I can do something. I can do something hard. I can create something for myself. And I think that's a beautiful part of the human experience. You might find earlier in your career that you're motivated for prestige, for importance, for financial success, for all of those things. And I actually think that's very normal and healthy, actually, for people. It doesn't mean that's for everybody, but it was for me. I wanted to be something. I wanted to have something. And the funny thing is, you then climb that mountain, and then I have a business that's made me a lot of money, that's worth a lot, that all of those things. And I thought, oh, this is what being rich is like. And at the time for me, Alex, I was 50 pounds heavier than you see me now. I was spiritually disconnected. I was struggling in my marriage. I had more money, but I had a lot of challenges at that point in my life as well. And I said, oh, now I know. And now I know that's not what I thought it was. But Alex, how could I have known that without tasting it? And so that's the thing that I love about life, is that we learn through contrast and through experience. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a way to do it wrong, as long as we learn and grow from those experiences. So for the second stage of my business, I said, okay, if it's not just about making money, what inspires me? What motivates me? What gives me energy? And that's when I went through a lot of the practices that we've been talking about to discover my why, my reason for being, why I show up, within my strengths, values, how I serve the world, and in the way that I make money. And that is like I see and activate the greatness in others. And when I stay true to that, it's funny because the business has grown bigger. It actually makes more money now, but now it actually feels authentic and more aligned to who I am and how I use those resources to stay true to my purpose as well. And so I think that first mountain, those first goals in a business career are healthy. I think you'll learn a lot about yourself, who you are, what you're not, what matters to you, what doesn't matter to you. And through that contrast, there's this beautiful transition that happens for people that choose to make it, to make that transition, to go from what they thought they wanted and who they were to who they really are and what they now want. And the even better thing is it continues to evolve and get better from there as well. And so it's kind of like this never-ending game of life in business that I just love playing. And I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to do that.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. It's really inspiring. Is there a path you'd recommend for people to do something that is connected to their why right off the bat? Or does it require that experimentation and the hard work to get to a place where you can start to think about that? How can we learn from that life path itself and try to, get to, can you get to that second level earlier? I know you said there's no shortcuts, or not.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that with a couple of examples, but I would say that collectively, I actually do see this accelerating in humanity right now, where people used to go through their midlife crises towards retirement in their 50s and 60s. I see midlife crises happening in mine and others' lives in their 20s and 30s now as well. And so I do see it accelerating. And if I said, Alex, no matter what, could you know the difference between sweet and salty if you'd never experienced it for yourself? And that's where I'm saying there are no shortcuts, because theoretically you could understand the difference, but until you taste something salty and you taste something sweet, you won't know the difference. But if you said, hey, I'm going to try and understand my purpose as best as I can at 22, for example, then you're going to understand it the best, and you're going to be more intentional and conscious about what you're doing in your 20s. And you're still going to discover more about who you are, what you value, what you don't through experience. And experience is the part that you can't shortcut. Here's what you can accelerate is not needing to experience something 100 times before you can move on to the next one. Okay. That's the part that you can accelerate. And so a midlife crisis typically happens when someone knows they're not living authentically and they keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. That's the part that can be accelerated. And that can avoid a lot of unnecessary suffering that is self-created. And so accelerated, yes. Shortcut, you still have to experience sweet and salty first. But addictions, emotional, and I think the ones that we all struggle with is no one wants to feel their feelings. So I think that's where a lot of us get stuck in our journey. And that's why we get addicted to our phone or substances or behaviors or whatever that might be, because we don't give ourselves the opportunity to feel and fully experience the contrast of our lives, right? And so we keep chasing something that just inevitably becomes something that we repeat over and over again. So we can accelerate it, but I don't think you can shortcut it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. How did you learn all of this? Like, do you have your own set of mentors? Like, what would you describe it as that really gave you this clarity?
I have always had mentors, which I think is great. Even as a kid, I always got along with like the older people in my neighborhood, and I just respected what they had to share. But Alex, I'm a very immersive personality. And one of the things that is one of my strengths is I'm just willing to try things, even if I look like a total idiot. And not always, but a lot of the times that allows me to work through and experience things a little faster. The funny thing is, you say that, but from my perspective, with this disruptive university concept, I bring back everything it took me a decade to figure out, and people pick it up in like 2 months. I'm like, man, that was really hard for me. And I guess, I don't know if people are, I'm kind of that person that's blazing the trail and coming back bloody, sweaty, tired, and like, okay, it works, guys. Like, here's what you need to know. Like that's just part of my personality and how I kind of lead and move things forward. But I have a peer group. I like to have some inner circles of leadership in my companies, peer groups where I'm not the boss. I think it's important to have peers that can highlight and give you a mirror into who you are when you have no authority over them. And then I always have some sort of coach for an area of my life that I'm excited to get better at, with someone that has demonstrated their ability to be great in that specific area as well. So I invest in that, and I always have since my late 20s.
That's great. And that makes a lot of sense. I definitely try to reach out to peers and mentors and get as much help as I can, because I think that's really the best way to get bespoke advice, not just reading online and trying to get the one size fits all answer, but people who care about you and are thinking about what, you might be missing.
Yeah. And great mentors occasionally will give you really direct feedback. Most of the time, great mentors just share their experiences so that you can learn from them as well, but apply it to your specific situation. I actually think a mentor that you may consider not wanting to work with is someone that regularly tells you what to do because they think they know what's best for you. I would steer clear of that. I've tried that. I've seen that really take people down pretty painful paths, because Alex, only you know what's best for you and only I know what's best for me. Good mentors encourage you to trust yourself, to believe in yourself, to take action in that area where you've been hesitant. They don't typically tell you what to do.
I've learned so much from you. I feel almost like scared because I think that you're doing it so well that it's like intimidating to learn from you. I don't know how to even phrase what I'm saying, but I really am appreciative of all the advice that you're giving here. It's incredible. I want to be speaking to my future self right now, and that's sort of how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the part that feels scared isn't you. Our minds and our bodies always want to keep us safe, but we're all a mind, body, spirit complex. The spirit always wants growth, expansion, and contrast. The body wants to preserve energy, wants to eat, sleep, and procreate, and the mind creates identities that it wants to protect. So anytime we're feeling fearful, I just try to remind myself, oh, my body's just trying to keep me safe. My mind's just trying to keep me safe. But there's a part of you that knows you're ready to act and experience something new. And that feeling of like, oh, this is a little scary, like stepping outside of what I know and trying, like, and going for it. It does feel scary, and it will lead you to the most beautiful life and outcomes you couldn't even imagine. And so it's like, it's worth it to act on that. And you're moving in the right direction because your body and your mind will feel a little fearful, like, whoa, but I don't know what that's going to happen and I can't predict all of it. And that feels scary. That could challenge my security. But then there's that part of you that knows, oh, but I know that's the right thing. I need to do it,
Yeah.
And the more you listen to that inner knowing, life becomes an adventure worth telling. The more we choose not to act on that inner knowing, life becomes pretty mundane or more filled with suffering because our spirit's like dying. Yeah.
Wow. What are some sacrifices that you've had to make along the way that have returned for you the most positive outcomes?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I had to let go of that was very painful for me, I mentioned to you the first few years of the business. It was great, but it was all about prestige, money, growth, those types of things. And I found myself to have that. I had given up spiritual, physical, mental health. Dude, I was like so volatile with my emotions, like depending on how the business was doing, that there was some interesting and maybe not appropriate for the podcast ways that people would describe Jake's mood swings in the business. And I found that to drive that hard in business, that like my marriage was not working. And we were like, if it stays like this, is not going to work. And so we were in marriage counseling, and I had an experience where I realized through some good questions that I was using my business and financial success as a justification to not take responsibility anywhere else in my life, my marriage, my physical health, my spiritual health. And I blamed everyone else. I said, you're the problem, because how could I be the problem if I'm a successful entrepreneur? Right? Like, and that was kind of like my moment where everything came to like one of those life defining moments when I became so aware of it. I could see it so clearly that I knew I had a choice to make. And that's when I decided, because when we were going through marriage counseling, I said, yeah, I'm quick-witted, I'm good on my feet, and eventually she'll realize she's the problem and we can move forward with our relationship. Like, that's the attitude I went into it with, right? And then all of a sudden realizing, oh my gosh, I can see how I'm contributing to this. And what would it be like to be married to someone that doesn't see and treat you like a partner for like 10 years? We had 3 kids. We've been married for 10 years. And so what you're experiencing is the other side of a lot of the pain and suffering that I went through of pursuing things that were not authentic to who I was. But part of my life experience was to know that so that I can come and talk to Alex and say, and here's what I learned. And on the other side of that, I stopped trying to fix my wife and I stopped trying to blame her. And all of a sudden I started taking personal responsibility. And the things that I sacrificed with my mental, physical, and spiritual health, I don't sacrifice anymore. Because when my cup's full, I run the business better, I manage my life better, and I show up as a better partner as well. And that sacrifice to say, and I'm willing to take personal responsibility and start working on myself rather than blaming it on everyone else. My reminder that it's worth asking the hard questions and taking personal responsibility is I have a four-year-old little boy that wouldn't be here if we didn't work through our challenges in our marriage. And he's my reminder every day of like, it's totally worth it. It's worth the risk. That part that you described that feels a little afraid to like, I feel inspired to go take action and live my life a little bit differently. I wouldn't have predicted that. I have 3 girls and I wouldn't have predicted that brought me a little boy after making those hard decisions. And he's my reminder. He's my reminder that it's like, when you heed that, when you become aware and you know there's something that you need to take action on, taking action on it, no matter how painful it feels at first, it's like you have no idea what's waiting for you on the other side of that. And you know, it's the harder it is to do, to be honest and take action, there's something equally special on the other side of that as well.
Wow. Yeah, that really got me. I thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, motivational would be an understatement. And I think what you're saying is you gave up a lot of ego, a lot of serving your own, deeper, more animalistic side for being more responsible and more of a caretaker to the people around you. And that's a very difficult transition, I think we were all born with, a sense of like ourselves as like a very important thing. And then as you get older, you start to care more about the people around you and how you can help them, kind of bringing it full circle. And that's ultimately where I think a lot of happiness is in making the lives of the people around you great, as well as your own.
I agree.
I want to thank you, Jake, for coming on and sharing your experience. It's been really moving to me to listen to. So thank you.
Thanks, Alex. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.